Hi, this is Glow, and you are tuned in to Critical Justice, a show where we cover topics related to race, history, and politics. Today, I'm pleased to have Trahern Crews join me for what I think will be a really great discussion. Trey is a community organizer and former spokesperson for St. Paul, Minnesota's Green Party. He ran to be the mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota in 2017 and for the Minnesota House of Representatives in 2018. And he's worked as a campaign manager on several political campaigns in Minnesota. Crews runs an organization called Original Man Farms, which deals with teaching urban farming to the youth. And he's also the co-founder of Black Lives Matter Minnesota. Today, he's an advocate for reparations and is using his local organizing skills to push the reparations agenda forward. Thanks for being here, Trey.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to hop right into the questions. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, okay. So until recent years, Minnesota wasn't really on the national radar for racial issues, but is now under a microscope because of the murders of Philando Castile, Daunte Wright, and George Floyd. Can you tell us about some of the issues descendants of American chattel slavery face in Minnesota? And with this new climate, do you see any progress being made?
Well, some of the issues, as you might know, just recently in February, WCCO put out a report from Wallet Hub that said Minnesota has the third worst racial wealth gap behind Wisconsin and Washington, D.C. So we have some of the worst disparities in education, health, housing, employment. Here in St. Paul, Chief of Police Todd Axel said that Black motorists in St. Paul are 4 times more likely to be pulled over than our white counterparts.
The police chief of St. Paul, Todd Axtell, is with us. He is on the Shift Real Estate Hotline. We often reach out to the police chief when things are difficult, when it's not always easy for him to come on, and he comes on this show frequently to answer these questions, so I appreciate that, sir. So you obviously were alerted about this story. You were interviewed about the story. You knew it was coming out. Do you agree with the data? The major takeaway from the Pioneer Press when they looked at police data from 2016 to 2020, where it says Black drivers nearly 4 times more likely to be pulled over than white drivers.
Yeah, Chad, thank you very much for having me on the show. You know, we never have and never will shy away from the challenging conversations that have to be had. You know, yes, the data in the Pioneer Press is accurate. I'm happy every year that we have these courageous conversations about race and how it intersects with policing.
Teachers are on strike right now here. Our kids just went through COVID, so that kind of interfered with their schooling. Before COVID, our kids were suffering in the school system. We have situations like in Prague school where kids are just playing sports and there are adults in the crowd making monkey noises and things like that. So we're facing very deep, entrenched systemic racism. And according to Demos, the racial wealth gap is substantial and is driven by public policy. And public policy is our laws that are made. So like slavery, racial covenants, housing discrimination, employment discrimination, racial profiling, and things like that.
So I would say, based on your answer there, you know, we can't really say that much progress is being made, right? We, you know, maybe kind of not as maybe in your face or violent as it has been in the past, just in terms of general violence, but like those policies that are keeping us out also economically. So not only are motorists being stopped unjustly or unfairly or more frequently, but then all other things that you've already just mentioned. So I didn't know what it was like in Minnesota until, like I just said, until these recent years. And I'm like, what is going on in Minnesota? Why do these things keep happening there? So let's get into the next question. Looking at your activist work, I see that you're involved in teaching children urban farming, violence prevention, educating about homelessness and the abuses in public policing. How did you get involved with activism, and what drew you to these specific issues?
Well, I was involved in hip hop and the arts, and a lot of those skills were transferable to our activism. So like writing rhymes is similar to writing a speech. We were making videos and stuff, music videos, but we still have to make videos when we're filming the police or doing what me and you are doing right now, photography, recording, all those skills, graphic design, all those skills were transferable to our activism. But instead of just making music is very important to activism too. And it's always been very important. Even in the 60s, a lot of the music that came out was very important, but those skills we use those skills now for police accountability and the fight for economic justice. So that's kind of how I got into activism. Then I also got tapped to be a friend of mine who had made some beats for me, but he grew up in the church. His name was Marcus Walker. His dad actually taught me how to play the piano, Reverend Walker, shout out to Reverend Walker. But then he decided to run against Sandy Pappas. And Sandy Pappas was never really getting challenged. She had been there for 30 years and she's still there. And he decided to run against her. And so he asked me to be his campaign manager. And then that's how I got involved as far as politics. Then the following year, Lena Buggs decided to run against Rena Moran, and she was running as a Green with the Green Party, and then that's how I got introduced to the Green Party. I had already knew about reparations, but the Green Party was the only party that had reparations as part of their platform. And so that's how I got involved in that.
Great. I actually have a follow-up question here about the homelessness, about homelessness in Minnesota. I've often read that for the most part, there's this large disparity in like the percentage of the American homeless who are Black men. Do you see this in Minnesota as well? Or what does it kind of look like from a racial aspect in terms of homelessness in Minnesota?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of homeless Black men in Minnesota, but it's more than you can really tell because people might not be living in a shelter or like in but they might be couch hopping or things like that.
Right.
But then it's not like they're not working. It's not like they don't have jobs. Some people are bringing in $3,000 a month or doing still good, but because of structural racism, there's other issues that stop Black men in the city of St. Paul or in the Twin Cities from getting housing. And that could be from like felonies, past convictions and things like that. So that's some of the structural, and that's going back to the racial wealth gap when we talk about it's substantial and driven by public policy. So even some of the policies right now, as far as we've just seen rent control. Mm-hmm. The community voted to have this law in place, and then the Senate just voted it down.
Republicans in the Minnesota Senate are moving to cancel rent control in St. Paul and Minneapolis.
Yeah, doing so would overturn what voters passed less than 6 months ago. Political reporter Theo Keith is at the Capitol tonight. Theo?
Well, St. Paul voters passed a strict cap, while Minneapolis voters gave their city council permission to do it. This bill being debated here at the Capitol would not only overturn those votes, but ban other cities from enacting rent control.
Wow. And so you kind of, talked about the policies and you touched on one, and we know how devastating housing policy in this country has been to our community specifically and in Minnesota. And it has an extensive history of just like disgusting practices as it relates to just the unfairness and the disparities that have been put in place because of those policies. As someone from St. Paul, Minnesota, can you tell us about what happened to the Rondo community?
My mother some of my friends sitting here that grew up in the Rondo community. So the Rondo community was a thriving community of businesses, Black businesses, and Black homeowners that were in that community. And then again, going back to policy, I-94 was built. They built the construction right through the Rondo community and dispersed people, and then gave them pennies on the dollar for their houses and stuff. And then not only that, there were racial covenants. And back then, people couldn't go past like Rice Street and things like that. The East Side was very racist. They were burning crosses on the East Side up to in the 90s, that recently. So that's what, so when we do say there hasn't been a lot of progress, I don't think we understand how racist Minnesota has been and what we experienced here. So we're in a crisis, but then I know, this is the first time with Derek Chauvin that a police officer in Minnesota has been sent to prison for murdering a Black person. Then followed that up with Kim Potter. Then even before that, Frank Baker, a dog was sick on him. They stomped on his chest. His lungs collapsed. He was awarded $2 million, but also that officer is serving 6 years right now. Oh, you guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we lost volume a little bit there, but for a few seconds. But yeah, that's a lot to take in. You said through the 90s, there were still crosses being burned.
In the 90s, there were still crosses being burned on the east side of St. Paul. I remember just things here, like there's a Mississippi River, so there would be people that understand what it means for the police to take you down to the Mississippi River.
Wow.
At night. And where it's like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, no lights, So when, that's what I said, when we don't know how racist it really was. So when we say we haven't made progress, we haven't, but it's the fact that Derek Chauvin's been sent to prison, is the fact that Tootal's in prison. I think within the last year, we've sent 7 white supremacists to prison, as far as Kim Potter, Derek Chauvin, Tootal, Derek Lang, Anthony Trifoletti, the officer who, what happened to Frank Baker here in St. Paul, he had his lungs collapse, was bitten by a dog, but that officer serving 6 years. Right. So it's a tiny, tiny bit, even though that happened in a quick amount of time, but we have so much, the racial wealth gap is so substantial that that we have so much work to do. Right.
Now, you've mentioned the racial wealth gap a couple of times. So let's talk about this. Recently, the Minnesota State Legislature introduced Bill HF 3850, which is a bill to study and develop reparation proposals for descendants of chattel slavery who reside in Minnesota. I know you've been doing work in the reparation space. Can you describe the process that allowed for your state to get to this point? And do you have any advice for activists around the country who have similar goals?
Well, so when George Floyd happened, BLM Minnesota knew that it wasn't just a police issue, it was an economic issue. Also, there were, because of because of what happens here, and I love the movement here. I love our police accountability movement here, but sometimes the focus gets lost on what is actually the focus can get lost and the message can switch to something else that's not focused on getting justice for Black lives. So we had to make sure that our justice, that it stayed focused on us and Black people and what's important to us. And we felt what was the most important to us was reparations. And because reparations at the top of it, and this is how we think about it, is reparations and direct cash payments is pure reparations. But then after that, you have to address the criminal justice system. And the reason why we one of the first things that you have to address the criminal justice system is because it's like the military component locally of white supremacy on the Black community. So it enforces the racist laws that are being practiced against us. So, but anyway. So when that happened, but even before that, we were I had got elected to be the chair of the Green Party United States Reparations Working Group.
Okay.
So in the philosophy of the Green Party is from the bottom up instead of top down. So I thought, well, let me start working at the local level right away. So we start doing events right here in Minnesota, like at the Rondo Library, at the East Side Rice Street Library. And then I got invited to the Men by Men conference and held one there. And then Jane Prince came to that. And then she really liked the presentation.
So when we talk about the resolution, what are the next steps in order to get this resolution passed?
Well, I think what we'll be doing is we want to act on what the African American community wants us to be doing. And so our next step is going to be reaching out through Trahern and through all of our connections to put together a statement of how we want to start addressing this in St. Paul. And beyond that, it should be something that the state of Minnesota is doing and our whole country. But as a city council person, when I found out that the city of Evanston outside of Chicago had done it, I thought there's no reason that we can't start here. So, but it isn't going to be my resolution as much as it's going to be the statement of our African American community speaking to us about what they want to see us doing and what our first steps are.
Sure. And what kind of timeline are we looking at for something like this?
Well, I think a resolution could easily be done yet this summer. Wow. And then in terms of Evanston, they passed an ordinance, and a lot more discussion would have to happen from within the African American community to guide us on what that ordinance might look like.
Sounds good. Thank you both so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And then she called me and said, hey, I think this is something that we could do or that we can start happening. But I didn't want us to just go to the city council and be like, this is reparations. This is what it is. So we started a book club so that community members can be involved once a month and start talking about the issues and discussing reparations and the racial wealth gap and what we're going through and why it's important. And then that kind of start building a coalition of organizations who support it. And then we formed a steering committee who went out and did the work of talking to community members. We created and this is what especially I encourage people, if you're in another city or something, to start with like a letter of support, like a petition, and get the Black businesses and Black people in your community to sign on to that letter of support. Then we created a resolution. Then and this was so before this while we were doing that, then COVID happened. So first we were meeting in person, and then it's like the second or third meeting we had to start meeting like this. But we didn't,
virtually.
We were already, and then George Floyd happened. And then, so we was like, it's a no-brainer. This is how we should respond, we believe the city should respond. So when we were doing George Floyd, we were able to talk about reparation, how America has had their knee on our neck for 400 years, and that this is an economic issue. We had a big rally at the Capitol, I believe, that first year, but it was a reparations rally in coordination with Juneteenth, and then there were people in solidarity with us across the country. But the online movements, the Yvette Carnells, the Tone Talks, the Tariq Nasheeds, the B1s, the Boyce Watkins, what you guys are doing, new Black media is so important to this current reparations push. And so I just salute you guys on what you're doing. So all that turned into, so James Prince was the lead author, but then all 7 city council members, none of which are Black or American descendants of chattel slavery, co-authored it and passed it unanimously. That was the St. Paul Recovery Act. So the Minnesota Migration Act is an extension of the St. Paul Recovery Act, but it kind of But the St. Paul Recovery Act, because you have to create an ordinance, it created a legislative advisory committee that creates the ordinance. Then the ordinance has to pass. But the Minnesota Migration Act, because there's a legislator, there's not a need for the LAC. So it'll just be like, this is what we think should happen. Are you going to do it or not? And so that's where we're at with that. And that's what, so that's what kind of how we did it. And I think people like look at the complexity of the body that you're going to, because maybe you can't do it at the state level. You might have to find a certain city, so I don't want to talk too much about that, but that's we could discuss strategy though.
Okay. Yeah. So with this, so of course we're talking about at the state and perhaps even the local level. Do you have an opinion of those who are talking about like federal reparations, or is your space that you're playing in right now just the state and local? Like, what are your thoughts on federal reparations legislation?
Well, when I had got elected to the Green Party, it was for, federal reparations, but I still thought that we should start from here and that. So with the St. Paul Recovery Act, what's in there is that the city council now are reparations activists. So they not only work on reparations here, but they're supposed to advocate for reparations at the state and federal level.
Gotcha.
So definitely not only federal, local, municipal reparations, state reparations, federal reparations.
Gotcha.
And private reparations. So no one should be off the hook. If Wells Fargo was involved in slavery, then they need to be a part of this. The University of Minnesota was involved in this. You need to be a part of this. New York Bank met these people who had insurance policies on us. You need to be part of this. If you advertised an auction for a slave auction, then you need to be a part of this. Georgetown needs to be a part of this. Yale needs to be a part of this.
Right.
Brown needs to be a part of this. The medical industry who experimented.
That's right.
There will be no medical industry in America without chattel slavery. They experiment with Marion Sims. So just everybody has to pay, and that's how we shouldn't leave anything off the table. And just if you look at our Jewish brothers and sisters, the people France, there was a train company who gave them a ride to Auschwitz. They got to pay reparations. Yeah,
everyone who's complicit got to pay. Like, you were involved, you got to pay. No, I'm with you on that. I got you on that. I agree. I'll throw in mainline denominations. They got to pay too. These churches, they got to pay too. Everybody, everybody got to pay. Yeah, no, I that. So we kind of touched on who got you into the Green Party and like what kind of introduced you to the Green Party. And, although you're, involved in local politics very heavily, it is interesting that you're independent, right? Like in a lot of ways, you're outside of like this two-party system. And so I think in the larger scale, like kind of grand scheme of things, we're at a time in what I feel is a really unique time in our history in terms of American politics, where Black Americans we're reevaluating our position between these two parties. And I just wanted to talk to you really briefly about your decision to stand outside of this two-party paradigm. Like, was it that the Green Party had this reparations aspect and that they were the only ones, or were you kind of leaning that way anyway? Were you a long-term or a long time, D or an R, or were you always independent? Like, what got you to that place?
Well, I never thought that I would be involved in politics like this, but I always was interested in it, but never really wanted to be like a candidate or anything like that. I always wanted to do like.
Those are the best people to run, by the way.
Yeah.
The people that didn't think they wanted to do it.
You guys should run too, people should run. But how I got in, I would say, outside of the two-party system is watching what happens. So and I'm not gonna, what I seen happen when I was running Marcus Walker's campaign and knowing that he was the son of like a pastor and, he I just felt like he should have won that. You know, I think he could have if we would have did a few more things, but I learned a lot about that there was white supremacy in the Democrat Party right here in Minnesota at that time. And I think even the Democrat Party was forced to change because we were in the Green Party. You know, there was nothing, so it would just be like black people or just progressives wouldn't have a choice in St. Paul because all you have is the Democrat Party. And then if you vote Republican, it's going to be like, well, then they would feel like I'm voting for my demise or I'm voting for people who's going to
right
my services and things like that. So
right.
Before we joined the Green Party, if you look at the policies of the Democrats prior to like 2014, 2013, they weren't talking about like legalizing marijuana. It still hasn't been legalized, but we were pushing them on that. They weren't talking about reparations. The Green Party, because we were outside of the status quo, we were able to pressure them and say, hey, you're taking the black vote for granted. You say that these are your people and this is the base, but your base is in poverty. Your base is getting killed by the police. Your base can't get a place to live. Your base is getting discriminated against on the job, but you want them to phone bank. You want them to door knock. You want them to donate. You know? So we would have to bring that to the Democrat Party and be like, if you're going to be, you know, the Green Party, if you feel like you're being taken for granted, you could join the Green Party or be independent. You know, so that's why I think independent politics are so important. But now I think what the current reparations push in the United States has even taken it a step further beyond just and also I was always kind of a black environmentalist, but when I look, people were like the Green Party were environmentalists, but I was like, well, look at our political environment. You know, our political environment for black people in the state of Minnesota is very hostile. So I was an environmentalist, but not just a tree hugger, but like a political environmentalist.
Right.
But I also was into teaching urban farming and things like that. So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm rambling.
No.
That was why I was thinking it was important for us to get outside of that toxic two-party system, which we talk about the duopoly, but whether it's capitalism or socialism, our issue is white supremacy and institutional racism. So now that we're talking about, and you can see that by what's happening in Ukraine right now, but with us, so it's getting outside of that two-party system, but also agenda-driven politics.
That's right.
So that's a big thing that I learned when I was running. You would get questionnaires from whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. The NRA is going to send you a questionnaire, and they're going to say, do you support my right to bear arms? Do you support semi-automatic weapons? You know, and then if you say no, then they're going to say, well, thank you for your time, but we can't support you. And they're going to ask the next person if they do, and if they do, they're going to support them. So that's how I feel we should be doing politics right now. So right now we're working on something called the National Independent Black Caucus that will be focused on agenda-driven politics and endorsing candidates who support reparations and the Black agenda. And I think that's how we should be moving that. And I love, you know, even if you're a local Democrat or if you don't support reparations, I can't support you.
Right.
If you don't support the agenda, I can't support you, whether you're running for city council, school board, Senate, or president. You know, we got to ask you, do you support our agenda? Or we'll be in a situation like we are now with President Biden, you know, not to talk bad about him. I know he's going through a lot, but he signed 77 executive orders, and none of them really have helped the people who got
That's
him.
right.
If it wasn't for Black people like us in Detroit, Black people in Atlanta. Think Atlanta went blue for the first time in like 30 years. The Black people in Philadelphia got Mr. Biden over the top. Yet, and he met with Breonna Taylor's mom, met with George Floyd's family. His sister was like, nah, though. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going. But the George Floyd Act's not signed. That could have been an executive order. He could do an executive order on HR 40 or some type of reparations proposal. or a COVID relief package or something for some immediate relief for Black Americans. But so that's why in 2022 and 2024, we need to be doing agenda-driven politics and making sure whoever we vote for has our best interests, especially our economic interests.
100%. It's been interesting over the the last few years when I really started researching things and really getting into talking about reparations with my family, with really anybody who would listen, right? Like I'm talking to my people that are right near me in my area of influence. And it's been really interesting because it becomes such a litmus test. Like you can really see where people are, even the most progressive people, you can see what they really think if you just start talking about reparations.
Exactly.
You really feel a it'll either they'll say, oh yeah, I'm for that, or they just scatter. And sometimes it's folks that you don't expect to on their other politics, right? And so, it's been really interesting. And so I'm with you on that. We need to be agenda driven, and I do use a litmus test. And my first question is, what is your full position on reparations for the American descendants of chattel slavery? What is it? And if it doesn't sound right to me, then I can't be on your team. So I'm with you on that.
Exactly. I'm glad you are.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great, that we're all we're getting more politically sophisticated as a group, as ADOCs.
Yeah. So you spoke on inequality earlier when we were talking. And we know that Minnesota is ranked high in terms of racial inequality, like economic inequality, the racial wealth gap. Do you think we were just talking about the two-party system. Do you think it's time for both sides to reevaluate how to address these racial disparities? And as a follow-up question, what do you think progressives get wrong about racial issues?
I think it's twofold. I think there's a part where we the parties, but I think it's us.
Okay.
I think the more sophisticated we come, and the more we start questioning people, not just saying, "Oh, he has a good suit," or this person. We're really getting down to what we just was talking about, agenda-driven politics, and if they're really supporting our issues. Whether you're Republican, if you're Republican and you're supporting reparations and you're going hard in the paint, I'm gonna support you.
Right.
If you're a Democrat or a Green and you're going hard in the paint for us more than the other candidate, then that's how we should move. That will change how politicians deal with us, and things like that.
And so, hopping back to this really quickly, what do you think folks who would label themselves progressives or allies to Black Americans, what do you think they get wrong about racial issues? And what do you think they get right? What do you think they get right, and what do you think they get wrong as it relates to us and the things that we need and want?
So I think the Democrat Party has a structure, and I'm not here to bash Democrats or anything like that, but I think they have a structure that makes it easier for them to hire Black people.
Okay.
We started out with the Democrat Party early, like Head Start. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know how many Republicans work at Head Start, but if you just think about that, you know what I'm saying? So you're starting to learn kind of a certain, as a child, you're getting these type of ideals pushed into political ideals pushed into our children at an early age, So I think what progressives get wrong or have gotten wrong or may not even be getting wrong is things like BIPOC. That's recent, but that's more recent. So just Representative John Thompson was explaining this. There was a farming bill that came out, or that he was trying to work on, and there was $250,000 from Among American Partnership, who does great work. Then there was $250,000 for the Latina Development Corporation.
Okay.
And there was $75,000 for BIPOC. he said, well, let me put down African American. They're like, no, just put down BIPOC.
Why?
But then if you put down, when he puts down BIPOC, but see, they've been doing this to us for at least the last, whenever they started doing this, BIPOC thing. And so, but there's $75,000 for that. But those top two groups can go into that pot, the BIPOC pot, but that blacks can't go into the Hmong American part.
That's right.
For the Latina X part. So again, that comes down to us saying, well, wait a minute, I'm not BIPOC.
Right.
And expressing that to them and saying we need something set aside for ADOCS. So those are some of the things that kind of trying to put all of us into one group and saying one size fits all for racial justice. So that's why we move away from racial justice and go into lineage justice. We talk about our lineage, that we need certain set asides for our lineage.
Right.
And then
for us as a unique people group, you know what I mean? Like who have experiences that are unique to us in this nation. It's so funny that you said that, because I feel like BIPOC is like the child of like minority. I feel like they've been doing that for a long time, where it's just like this stew of people who are not white.
Right.
That they can kind of just mix us into, because even when you get into Latinos, well, you can be a white Latino, so but still there's, anyway, so all of that, to your point, gets to be minority or BIPOC or whatever else, and
being someone from like India, like
anybody.
1 in 6 doctors here are from India, right? Their median income is way different than ours, or putting us, I know our Asian brothers and sisters face discrimination, but they're right now here in St. Paul, their median income is higher than white people.
Right.
If you lump us all together, that you're not acknowledging that,
Yeah. And I'll say this too. I think what I love right now, as far as is this type of discussion is concerned, is we just need to follow AAPI. They are saying disaggregate. We are not, the Vietnamese are not the same as the Korean, are not the same as the Pacific Islanders. Like, they are asking for those ethnicities to be split apart. And I think that we need to do that same type of push and that same type of fight. And to your point earlier too, when people start saying that BIPOC stuff and they actually mean Black or African-American, like descended from U.S. chattel slavery, we need to say, that's not the same. If you mean Black, say Black. If you mean Black American, say Black American. If you mean, descendants of American chattel slavery, say that. Don't say BIPOC. Don't say people of color if you're talking about us. So I
do that too. Even so, when you say progressive, that's also includes us.
Yes,
we have to make sure that we if we hear Black people saying BIPOC,
no,
this is who I am.
Yeah, we gotta, everyone doing it. We just have to be willing to kind of stand on it and say, please don't refer to me as that. That's not who I am. Absolutely. And so you touched on it a little bit. We don't necessarily have to talk about Joe Biden, but any thoughts on like our current Congress and kind of like what's going on? We talked about, you mentioned how Joe Biden had, he signed a lot of executive orders. None of them have quite been for us. So we do know that, but what are your general thoughts on his administration, Congress?
Because I'm still trying to get some work done.
But listen, because we can skip right over that one. If you want.
Closed mouth don't get fed, though. We're starving right now.
Right.
And so, again, we got him in, and so there should be, and I think if they don't do something big by Juneteenth, it's a wrap.
Yeah.
So like something like not just even past HR 40, but then there has to be something attached with some immediate relief to it. So we're working on bills that would come, because we don't just want to study. We need money right now, though.
That's
too.
Right.
So we need something, economic package for ADOCs too. Along with these studies, there needs to be some relief for us, our businesses, our families, our kids. Right now, we've been suffering. We suffered hard from COVID. Our Black businesses weren't able to get the money that they were supposed to get. The Black families really didn't get the money that they were supposed to get. Black fathers didn't get some of the money that they were supposed to get. And daycare costs, all that. So, and again, so after Biden was elected, there was like there was more troops in Washington, D.C. than there was in Afghanistan at that time. So we was out there to try to do some reparations rallies, but we really couldn't do nothing because of the military presence that was out there. So again, it's going to be back, starting to get warm out. I think people can protest in DC. We need to start we're going to have to start putting some, we protest for police brutality, but now we have to start protesting for economic justice. So that's why I would say I would just like when Obama was president for 8 years, they'd be like, wait till next term. Or I remember an article like the Black politician to give you a nod and a wink, like I got you, but then he never really got us. So we lost 50% of our wealth under Obama, and
we sure did. Yeah, so we lost 50% of our wealth under Obama, and then and you were talking, and then it just went out.
We lost 50% of our wealth under Obama. The median income is going to be 0 by 2053 for the Black family. So how we say in the Green Party, they talk about ending climate emissions by 2030 or clean energy by 2030 or we need to close the racial wealth gap by 2030. And that's how we should be moving as a community. So we're talking, let's close the racial wealth gap by 2030. And that's what we want the Democrat Party to be talking about. When they talk about the Green New Deal, we want to talk about reparations and closing the racial wealth gap.
So hopping back on that for reparations. And so you talked about like a lot of education and things that you did right there locally in your community, and you got business leaders on board, and just kind of how you did some coalition building and getting people up to speed on what reparations are, why we need them, all the education there. I'm really interested, what, if any, pushback did you get from us about reparations?
Most of it would be like, it'd never happen. Or sometimes people be like, I'm dumb. Once in a while you hear, not very many, but every now and then we would hear somebody be like, I'm good. Like they're doing good. Like feeling like I'm a millionaire or something. Like, okay. No. But even if you as a millionaire, you compare yourself to your white counterpart who's a millionaire, it doesn't add up. We had he didn't even attack. It was somebody from, I won't even say it, but he just we were in a meeting. He kind of tried to attack, but we were just saying, some of our elders, but they're pretty much all on board getting there. Right. I think we've been utilizing a survey. And so the surveys ask questions about what people think, what do you think reparations should look like? Do you think it should happen, and things like that? And a lot of people are for, I would say more people are for it. We've had more positive feedback than negative feedback. And even in the hearing that we just had, none of them didn't say they couldn't support it. They just asked a couple questions. Not even the Republicans yet. I would say yet. We're not out the water yet.
I always like to ask that question because there's like different groups, and based on those different groups, what objections you're going to get. And sometimes I know that within our own community, we have to do a little fighting. Then, of course, there are implications for the Democratic Party if reparations were to ever get through. Same for Republicans and what their objections are. And then people that consider themselves leftists, what their objections are. And so we're just kind of all over the place. So I was interested in hearing what you were hearing locally in your city.
Well, then outside of us, people, it would be like, well, not all the time. People bring up Native Americans or other groups too. So I think us talking in the education, when you start, Oh, and then there's some pride. Again, going back to the prideness, I think when we start talking about the racial wealth gap, some people think that we're putting Black people down. So I like to explain to people, this is not your fault. The racial wealth gap is driven by public policy.
Right.
It's not driven by your baby's dad. It's not driven by your baby's mom. It's not because little Jimmy stole a car yesterday.
Yeah.
Public policy. So just so people don't start feeling like something's wrong with them or that we're talking down to them.
Like there's been some type of moral failure or
So that's just trying to make sure that some of the some of our hardworking brothers understand that the racial wealth gap is not our fault. It's public policy. 400 years of public policy.
Very good. So we talked, and this will be my last one. We talked earlier about some of your areas of interest in your activism, right? So the urban farming, the violence prevention, educating about homelessness in your area and those abuses in policing. Can you share how people can get involved with your work and how people can help support your efforts in Minnesota?
Well, every month we have a reparations book club meeting that we're hosting. That's with the Eastside Freedom Library. So you can go to the Eastside Freedom Library and sign up there. If you go to the, we have a new Black Watch television or blacktvs.com where we're starting to stream a lot of activism, but also just programs we want to help. Hopefully we can restream this, but you can sign up there. And then you can go to stpaulrecoveryact.com and sign up there to get involved. And not only are we'll have the book club meeting, but then sometimes we have like coat drive giveaways, food giveaways. We had a like what America owes Black businesses. So we've been having a series of those at some of the Black restaurants and businesses around town. So we want people to come out, get involved, and have that conversation. And we'll be having listening sessions and hearings and stuff all across the state. Well, right now, all across St. Paul. And then pretty soon, I think the St. Paul Recovery Act Steering Committee ordinance should be done pretty soon here. Well, it pretty much is done, but I can't say too much about it. But there's going to be chances for the community to come out and poke some holes in it and take a look at it and get involved in that process too. So there's going to be a lot of ways to get involved, and we hopefully we can keep having you guys come on. We have a show too that comes on, so I'd like you guys to come and be a panelist on that. And just start bringing Black media across the state together once a week to discuss the issues.
Nice. Well, listen, you're talking about all this stuff you're doing, all this education. We're meeting here, we're meeting there. You are a busy man, Trey. I'm so glad, once again, so grateful that you could carve out some time to, join me on Critical Justice tonight. We really appreciate your time. Hopefully this won't be the last time that you and I can connect, and that you can connect with Critical Justice and the Reset Race Network. Thank you so much. And
thank you. Looking forward to partnering with you guys again.
Absolutely. All right. Y'all have a good one.
Join us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Reset Race Network.